We all want to believe that when a drug gets approved, it's safe and effective,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you see the commercials, you hear about the breakthroughs, and you figure all the hard work is done.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But the reality is, a drug's journey doesn't really end when it hits the market.
It's like, you think of something like thalidomide,
Oh, yeah.
initially prescribed for morning sickness, but then...
Devastating birth defects. Yeah.
Exactly. And it just really highlights that getting a drug approved is just the beginning of truly understanding its impact. It's like the first chapter.
It really is. And that's where post-marketing surveillance, or PMS, comes into play.
APMS.
Yeah. It might sound a little odd, but think of it as the ongoing story of a drug, once it's out in the real world.
Right.
Clinical trials are crucial, of course. They give us so much valuable data, but they occur in these, very controlled environments,
Right.
often with specific groups of patients.
Yeah.
PMS is where we see how a drug really behaves in the wild, so to speak.
Out in the real world.
Yeah, with a much broader and more diverse population. People with all sorts of different health conditions, taking various other medications.
All the complexities of real life.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're not going back to square one, the whole approval process.
No.
We're focusing on what happens after a drug gets that green light, that stamp of approval.
Right.
We've got some fascinating information here about how drugs are tracked in the real world.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to understand how those systems and methods actually work to monitor safety and effectiveness for you, the listener.
Because once a drug is available, that monitoring is crucial.
It is, and I think it comes down to recognizing that the initial testing phase, the clinical trials, have their limitations.
They do. They're incredibly important, but
But they can only tell us so much, right?
exactly. For starters, the number of people in these trials is a fraction of the potential users once a drug is on the market.
You could have millions of people using it.
Millions, yeah, compared to a few thousand maybe in a trial. And the participants in a trial are usually selected very carefully based on certain criteria.
Yeah.
So they might not represent the full range of patients who will eventually be using the drug.
It makes sense. Age, ethnicity, other existing health conditions, all those factors could be different in the broader population.
Yeah, and they could all influence how a drug affects someone.
And not to mention the other medications people might be taking.
Oh, that's a huge factor. So many potential interactions that you just can't fully predict in a controlled trial.
It's like test driving a car on a perfectly smooth track.
Yeah.
It's only when you take it out on real roads with potholes and traffic that you see how it truly performs.
That's a great analogy.
And thinking about it, it's not just about the human population. Even those preclinical studies, the ones done before human testing.
Right, often using animal models.
Right. Like they often use what are called mouse xenografts, which are basically models where human tumors are implanted in mice.
To see if a drug can shrink them, for example.
Exactly. But I remember reading that these models have their limitations too.
They do. One of the biggest issues is that the mice used often have suppressed immune systems.
Oh, right.
And that's to prevent them from rejecting the human tumor.
Right.
But it also means they're not fully representative of how a drug might interact with a normal functioning human immune system.
That's a big deal, especially for cancer treatments, right? Because so many new treatments are targeting the immune system.
Absolutely. Immunotherapy relies on a healthy immune response. And you also have to consider the tumor environment itself.
Environment.
Yeah, like the surrounding cells and tissues. In these mouse models, it can be quite different from the naturally occurring environment in a human body.
Oh, I see.
And that can impact things like angiogenesis, which is the formation of new blood vessels, a key target for many cancer drugs.
So what looks really promising in the lab based on these models?
Might not translate perfectly to the much more complex reality of human biology.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of rare side effects.
Oh yeah, those can be tricky to catch in trials.
If something only happens in, say, 1 out of 10,000 people.
You're unlikely to see it in a trial with a few hundred or even a few thousand participants.
Exactly. So you could have a drug out there being used widely.
And then a rare side effect starts popping up that just wasn't detected in the initial testing.
And even if the trials are large, there's still the time factor. Some problems might take months, years even, to develop.
Right, well beyond the time frame of most clinical trials. PMS provides that long-term perspective, which is so important.
It really is.
So we've established the why behind PMS.
The why?
Yeah, why it's so crucial. Now let's delve into the how.
The how.
Yeah, the systems and methods that make this ongoing safety check possible.
Okay, so we know why we need to keep tabs on drugs after approval. How do we actually do that?
There are several key systems in place, one of the most important being drug registries.
Drug registries.
Yeah. Essentially, they're organized databases that collect specific information about patients taking particular medications.
So it's like a dedicated record-keeping system for each drug.
In a way, yeah.
What kind of information do they actually collect? Is it just noting whether someone experienced a side effect or
Oh, it's much more detailed than that. They typically gather a whole range of data. Patient demographics, for example.
things like age and gender?
Exactly. Then you have their diagnosis, that's a specific condition they're being treated for, and of course the treatment detail.
The drug name, the dosage?
Yeah, how long they've been taking it, and crucially, the outcomes. How well the drug is working, and whether they experienced any adverse events.
So it's about building a really comprehensive picture of how a drug is performing across different types of patients.
That's the idea.
That's got to be incredibly helpful in identifying patterns, right?
Absolutely. By systematically collecting all this data, registries can help pinpoint trends in a drug's safety and effectiveness. For instance, a specific side effect might be more common in older patients or in those with certain pre-existing conditions.
It allows you to see those nuances.
Yeah, and that can inform prescribing practices and help tailor treatments more effectively.
And I imagine there's a whole other wealth of information in those existing healthcare databases.
You're right, those are massive. Things like electronic health records, insurance claims data.
It's like a goldmine of real-world patient data.
It really is.
Yeah.
And analyzing these large databases is another really important aspect of post-marketing surveillance.
But how do you even begin to find potential drug-related issues in all that data? It must be like looking for a needle in a haystack.
It can be, but that's where sophisticated data analysis techniques come in.
Data analysis.
Yeah. Researchers can apply statistical methods and computational tools to these data sets to search for associations between a drug's use and various health outcomes.
I see.
The scale of data available in these systems is immense, so it allows for the detection of even very rare signals that might have been missed in smaller studies.
It's almost like having this massive net that can catch even the smallest hints of a problem.
That's a good way to think about it.
So we've talked about these big data sources, registries, healthcare databases. How does the information actually get into these systems in the first place?
Several ways, one of the most basic being spontaneous reporting.
Spontaneous reporting.
Yeah. Essentially, healthcare professionals and even patients themselves can report any suspected adverse events.
Directly.
Yeah, they can submit reports to regulatory agencies like the FDA.
So if a doctor notices a patient experiencing a strange side effect after starting a new medication, they can just file a report.
Exactly. And that system helps capture a wide range of real-world experiences. It can be an early warning system for potential safety issues.
That makes sense, but it's all based on people noticing and reporting, right? So there's a chance some things get missed.
There is. That's one of the limitations of spontaneous reporting. You're relying on people to voluntarily submit these reports.
And there's no guarantee everyone will.
Right. And even when a report is submitted, proving a direct causal link between the drug and the reported event can be tricky.
Right, correlation doesn't equal causation.
Exactly. Just because something happens after taking a drug doesn't automatically mean the drug caused it.
So what are some more proactive methods for gathering data?
Well, that's where active surveillance systems come in.
Active surveillance.
Yeah. They involve more deliberate efforts to collect data on drug safety and effectiveness.
Okay.
For example, conducting targeted studies specifically designed to look for certain side effects, or surveying patients who are taking a specific drug.
So instead of waiting for reports to trickle in.
Researchers are actively seeking out the information.
Got it. And what about this idea of data mining and signal detection?
Those are really important too. They involve using statistical and computational methods to analyze those large data sets we talked about, the healthcare databases, the spontaneous reports.
Okay.
The goal is to identify potential safety signals.
Safety signals?
Yeah, things like unexpected patterns or a higher than expected rate of certain events in patients taking a specific drug. It's like using algorithms to sift through mountains of data and flag anything that looks statistically unusual.
It sounds incredibly powerful.
It is, and it allows for a much more comprehensive and nuanced analysis than relying on individual case reports alone.
So you can pick up on subtle trends that might otherwise go unnoticed.
Exactly.
Now, I also remember hearing about risk evaluation and mitigation strategies, or
RIMS
REMS, yeah. Those are specific programs that regulatory agencies can require for certain drugs.
for all drugs.
No, not all of them,
Yeah.
just the ones that have known or potential risks.
Okay.
It's like an extra layer of safety monitoring.
What kinds of things do these strategies involve?
They can involve a whole range of things, depending on the specific drug and its associated risks. For instance, requiring special training for the doctors who are going to prescribe the drug.
So they're fully informed about the potential issues.
Yeah. Or restricting the drug's use to certain healthcare settings where patients can be monitored more closely.
Okay.
In some cases, a REMS program might mandate the creation of a patient registry specifically for that drug. So it's a more focused and intensive approach for drugs with a higher risk profile.
Exactly. It's about managing those risks as effectively as possible.
So we've got all these systems and methods for gathering data and analyzing it. What's the role of the regulatory agencies like the FDA in this whole process?
They're absolutely central. The FDA and other agencies around the world are constantly monitoring all this post-market data.
From all those sources we've been talking about.
Yep. The registries, the databases, the spontaneous reports. And they have the authority to take action if they identify safety concerns.
Action, like what can they actually do?
They have a few options, depending on the severity of the concern. They can issue safety warnings to healthcare professionals and the public.
Like an alert about a potential issue.
Exactly. They can also require changes to the drug's label.
So including new safety information or limitations on its use.
Right. They can even restrict a drug's use to certain patient populations.
Like only allowing it for people who meet specific criteria.
Yeah. Maybe limiting it to those who haven't responded to other treatments, for instance. And in the most serious cases, where the risks outweigh the benefits, they can actually withdraw a drug from the market entirely.
So they can pull it off the shelves.
They can. It's not a decision they take lightly, but it's an important safeguard.
It really emphasizes that this whole approval process isn't a one-time thing.
It's not. It's an ongoing evaluation.
They're constantly reassessing whether the benefits of a drug still outweigh the risks as new data comes in.
Exactly. They have to stay on top of the situation to ensure patient safety.
And it's not just drugs.
Yeah.
Even after a medical device gets cleared or approved, the FDA can request additional clinical data.
Yeah, if concerns come up later on.
It's a good reminder that there's this continuous scrutiny of medical products even after they're out in the market.
Definitely. And it highlights the importance of staying informed as a patient.
This all makes me think about drug interactions, something we touched on earlier.
Oh, that's a huge area of concern in post-marketing surveillance.
Because it's hard to predict all the potential interactions in those controlled clinical trial settings.
Right, especially when you have people taking multiple medications.
And that's common, especially as people get older.
It is. They might be taking medication for high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, arthritis.
It all adds up.
And any one of those drugs could potentially interact with a new medication in a way that wasn't anticipated.
Do you have an example of a drug interaction that really came to light after a drug was already on the market?
Oh, absolutely. There's a classic case involving certain HIV protease inhibitors like ritonavir and an antifungal medication called ketoconazole.
Okay.
After these drugs were being used in clinical practice, it was discovered that ketoconazole is a very potent inhibitor of CYP3A4.
CYP3A4.
It's a liver enzyme that plays a key role in metabolizing, breaking down many different drugs.
Got it.
And it turns out that HIV protease inhibitors are metabolized by this enzyme.
Okay, I see where this is going. So if someone's taking ketoconazole at the same time as a protease inhibitor?
The ketoconazole can inhibit the CYP3A4 enzyme, which can lead to much higher levels of the protease inhibitor in the bloodstream.
Because it's not being broken down as efficiently.
Exactly. And that increased concentration can increase the risk of side effects. This particular interaction wasn't fully understood until these drugs were being used together more widely.
It really highlights why this ongoing monitoring is so crucial.
It is. It's not just about looking at a single drug in isolation. It's about understanding how it behaves in the context of all the other things going on in a patient's body.
The complexities of real life.
Exactly.
Now, we've been hearing a lot about artificial intelligence in healthcare these days. While our research for this deep dive didn't focus specifically on AI's role in PMS,
Right.
it does make you wonder how it might be used in the future.
It's a really interesting question. We're already seeing AI being used to analyze large data sets in various areas of healthcare.
Yeah, and it seems like a natural fit for PMS with all this data to sift through.
It does. Imagine AI algorithms scanning those massive healthcare databases, the spontaneous reporting systems, looking for subtle patterns and potential safety signals.
It could potentially identify issues much faster and more efficiently than humans could.
That's the idea. It could be a real game changer in terms of drug safety.
It's pretty exciting to think about.
It is. It's a rapidly evolving field, so it'll be interesting to see how AI shapes the future of post-marketing surveillance.
Well, this has been a fascinating look into a part of the drug development process that doesn't always get a lot of attention.
It's often overlooked, but it's absolutely critical,
Post-marketing surveillance is this continuous dynamic process.
relying on a whole network of systems and methods.
Registries, databases, spontaneous reports, targeted studies, all these things working together.
And at the heart of it all are those regulatory agencies, vigilantly monitoring the data and ready to take action to protect public health.
It's reassuring to know that the system is in place.
It is. It's all designed to make sure that the medications we all rely on are as safe and effective as possible.
And it makes you think, with all this data being generated every day, what other innovative ways might we find to use this information to make medicines even better?
It's an exciting area of exploration for sure. The potential is enormous.
It really is. And that's something for all of us to keep in mind, that the quest for better, safer medicines is an ongoing journey.
It definitely is. We're always learning, always striving to improve.
And that's a good thing for all of us.
Absolutely. Gives me hope for the future of healthcare.
Me too.